How you doing, everybody? Welcome to the Clues of Leadership podcast. I am your host, Dominic Waters. And as you know, on this podcast, we talk to public safety professionals and executives and leaders about how it is they got to where they are, the clues of leadership that they've learned along the way, and how we as the next generation can be better. And today I am super, super excited about this one because I understand that in this profession, people are really busy. And for this individual to take time out of his schedule and grace me on my platform to talk about his leadership journey, I am truly honored for that. So today, I want to introduce you the superintendent of the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Police, Orlando Lilly.
Hey, how
Colonel
you
Lilly, how
doing?
are
Thank you
you?
for having me on.
Yes. Gotta give you a little hand clap. Thank you, sir. How are
Yeah,
you
I
doing today?
appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm well, thank you for asking. How about yourself?
I am well. I have enjoyed today's weather. It is extremely nice outside. We haven't had a day like this in quite a while, so I've been outside the office today.
Therapeutic, therapeutic indeed.
Yep, yep. So, as we were talking before we started recording, this podcast is about leadership, but I don't think people are too familiar with you. So please just, give a little snippet of your bio, where you started from, how you got to where you are, and your years of service and that thing.
Okay, so I normally like having an opportunity to talk about how I entered the realm of law enforcement in general. I'm originally born and raised in North Carolina, a little town called Albemarle, North Carolina, probably about 40 or 45 minutes outside of Charlotte in itself. And I went through an incident when I was 10. My parents divorced, which was probably one of the most traumatic things that had occurred at that time in my lifetime. And my mother made a decision at that time that we were going to leave North Carolina to move to New Jersey. And as you can imagine, that was culture shock. I grew up on a farm. So I actually lived in New London, North Carolina before that. We had a farm. And so I was exposed to a very deep Southern background in all of the things, what I like calling the Southern accessories that went with that lifestyle. And so taking outside of that element and not really having a platform to be able to have discussions around what had occurred, everything that occurred in a 10-year-old boy's life who doesn't have the vocabulary to describe it, nor or an outlet normally starts to manifest in the way of behavior. And I'm no, I'm not, removed from that experience like any other person. And so I would get into trouble. I didn't really like police, not because I had any negative contact. I just used to would see the police in the inner city of Jersey engage with young minorities and a lot of the Latinas and Latinos within the community that I lived in New Jersey, and just did not like what I saw. I met a young guy by the name of Rolando. I'll only give his first name, and we became best friends. Puerto Rican kid, uh, just like kids, simple things. We became best friends because all you had to do, Dominic, was take the first two letters of our name and switch them around, and you had Orlando and Rolando. And so at that time, I would also carry the box cutter to school. So did he. Most of the kids at that age and that time were doing things like that. And we ended up in a situation where we uh, got in a fight. And the rule was we needed to take the box cutters, put them in a box, and fight straight up. Now, there's a caveat to me telling you about me growing up in the country.
Mhm.
Uh, there's a thing that we like saying that's country strong, and I was a country strong kid. And so, really, if you didn't grow up like that, you probably weren't gonna win a fist fight. And Rolando did not win the fist fight, and so I remember someone stopped the fight. I'm walking away. A young lady by the name of Melissa was trying to get my attention, and she tried to get my attention because someone had gave Rolando the box cutter back, and Rolando proceeded to try to cut me with the box cutter.
Oh wow.
So in my infinite wisdom at 10, I'm thinking, oh, I'll take the box cutter and fight him again. Uh, it did not work out that way. And he ended up cutting me from the top of my shoulder, my right shoulder, all the way around near my back. They had to rush me to the hospital. I lost so much blood that they actually thought I was going to die. A police officer came in from Jersey City to the hospital, and I remember the police officer being at the curtain while I was on the bed, and he was in tears.
Wow.
Man
I
that
can
did not look
imagine.
like me. Man that did not look like me. Portly, bald head. Actually, he wasn't really bald head. He had what we call that reverse fade. He had uh, no hair on the top, but everything on the side, right? And and so he proceeded to make the statement and ask the question, actually, not a statement, and said, "What in the world was happening to put a 10-year-old boy in a situation like
Mm.
that?" And I felt that compassion. My mother had went back to North Carolina. She realized that my brother and I needed to be around my father, and so she wanted to take us back. And so at this time, I was with my aunt. It was near the end of the school year, so we weren't really doing classes. And all I could remember in that moment was that if I lived, I said that I was going to be a police officer when I grew up. And I remember going to North Carolina, getting to North Carolina. It took me probably close to a year to really be able to have full use of the arm again. And this man checked on me every week. He called my mom every week to see how I was doing. Told my mother that upon me getting better, to put me in a Boys and Girls Club, and the rest was history. I moved back to my hometown. I moved across the street from now my wife, who literally lived in the same neighborhood as me. Um, I went in the military, went to college, and I kept my promise to myself. I said that I was going to be a police officer because I understood the impact of that officer on me, and I wanted to be able to have that same capacity to do that. So I spent 30 years in Baltimore County Police Department, retired there as a major, um, and then I was in April of 20. I retired March in 24, and in April 17th, 2024, I was appointed here as the superintendent of Maryland Natural Resources Police by the governor and Secretary Josh Coates.
Mm. And and so full circle, why do you think that that traumatic incident as a 10-year-old boy uh, changed the trajectory of your life and impacted you in such a way that you decided at that point that you were going to be a police officer?
I believe that we all encounter people, and you know as well personally that I'm a very spiritual person. And I believe that people are specifically put in our pathway to give us a purview of what our lives will look like. Now, naturally, I didn't have the vocabulary to articulate what I just said to you then, but I knew that something had occurred to me emotionally that impacted the way that I thought and felt about a group of people that I had not contacted them, but I always saw at a distance. And so that close encounter and contact person, how I saw myself. In that moment, I saw in that man's eyes somebody who didn't know me but had compassion for me. Somebody who had positional power and authority but didn't operate from that space. That person made himself be familiar to me in a way that I think most of us who come into the profession, the number one question, the response to the question of why do you want to become a police officer, and this is a statistical fact, is that people say they want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got to experience what that felt like for me. And so I wanted to be able to do that for people as well. Half of the harm that is done in this world, Dominique, to people is done from people who want to feel important. They do not mean to harm people at all, right? Uh, they absorb the endless struggle to think well of themselves. But in this profession, if you're doing it correctly, it is always done from the position of self-servant leadership. And I got to experience this person who could have came to that hospital. And mind you, now I'm gonna date myself. This was in 1979. This man came to a hospital and showed a young African American male compassion that he didn't even know from Adam. But what he
Mm.
knew was that I was another human being and that I was a young male who was put in a precarious situation that could have ended my life. Now, he probably has no idea that that vulnerability that I saw in his eyes and in his tears changed me. Because if somebody who was willing to serve was willing to be vulnerable to a little kid that they've never met, that's somebody I want to be like when I grow up.
And so you have been in this industry, learning from that and growing up, you have been in this industry for 30 plus years. If my math is correct, 30 years with Baltimore
Yes,
County plus the last 2 years here. So we 32 total or we 33
we're at right now we're at 30. This year will be 32.
this year,
We're
32.
at yeah, yeah. And so right now I'm at 31, uh 10 months and 11 days
Boy,
to be exact.
I tell you, you could keep track of those numbers when they get up there. I'm I
Yeah.
haven't even began to even count the days that I'm eligible for retirement because I'm nowhere near.
Mm,
I have a long
right,
way to
right.
go.
And don't
But
you have time? You have time.
Lord willing, Lord willing.
Mhm.
So you have had the opportunity to serve in, I guess we would call Baltimore County. You know how we break down law enforcement. That is a
Mhm.
county-wide police department, and now you are the head of the agency for conservation. Did I say it right? Is it conservation or
Uh, so Maryland Natural Resources Police Department is one of the few police departments in the country because normally you have either or. And what I mean by that is you either have one that's just solely conservation driven, or in our case, you have one that has full jurisdiction of the state that can actually enforce criminal law as well as conservation law. So we're the primary homeland security agency within the state of Maryland that has uh, statewide jurisdiction, but the primary lead agency on all the waterways in the state of Maryland.
so? Safe to say, you guys have the broadest jurisdictional bounds in the state of Maryland.
Absolutely, absolutely. You have to, and I put it in the context of that. I went to the police through the police academy for 20 something weeks. Um, Natural Resources Police Department Police Academy is 39 weeks. They do the regular 20 something weeks of constitutional law, all the things that I did. And then they have an additional several months to learn conservation law, as well as learn how to become tactical boat operators. And, what I like affectionately saying that they are the Navy SEALs of the police department on the water.
Oh, you are a Navy man, right?
I am. I am.
No
And
wonder
I'm
you would
extremely
correlate that.
biased. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm extremely biased. Yeah, extremely biased.
Yeah, you know what, I figured that. But okay, so that's interesting. I didn't understand the jurisdictional bounds honestly until you had took the helm of that department and began to explain exactly what it is that you guys police in your jurisdiction and just how intense the preliminary training is for your department and your officers. So that's amazing because, like you said, no other police department that I know of in our area can do what you guys do. Boat, land, parks, like yeah, it's a lot. So you're now the leader there, but your leadership journey didn't start there. Um, I would reckon to say it started when you were back home in Albemarle, North Carolina, right?
Yeah,
I, I, I,
absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
so how did
Absolutely.
how did your leadership journey begin, and when did you recognize? And I know we're going to backtrack here. When did you recognize that you wanted to be in a leadership position, and why?
Well, first I'll say that none of us true, and let's add this right. And I don't want to act like this was an Orlando Lilly thing. This is something that I acquired over my own journey of reading, and we'll talk about that as well in my leadership development and my journey. There's a book by Barbara Kellerman called Bad Leadership, and one of the things she points out quickly is for us to not have leadership bias, meaning that for those of us who hear the term to automatically associate positive attributes to the term leadership. So, for the sake of the conversation that I'm having with you today, I will be intentional and say positive leadership, my journey of positive leadership. And positive leadership does not seek out opportunities uh, to to lead or to be called a leader. Positive leadership understand that there's a level of attribution and contribution to people that exemplifies a behavior of influence, which automatically then starts to put you in a position of leadership. And so for me, growing up in a single family home, I was very athletic. And when I became the captain of my football team specifically, you didn't get to pick yourself. You didn't go up to the coach or the players and say, "Hey, I want to be the captain on the football team."
Mhm.
What we would do was we took little slips of paper and you had to write people's names and put it in the helmet while the helmet was passed around. Well, I never put my name down. I always put other people's name. Matter of fact, I didn't think of myself in that context. And but inevitably, I would always end up being one of the people that they would say, "Hey, this should be one of the team captains." And out of that role, leadership was an adjective that I heard but did not understand how to define. So what I can tell you was I learned how to make it a verb before I ever understood it as a noun,
Mm.
meaning that I learned how to exercise what leadership should look like before I could ever tell you as a noun or an adjective what it looked like. Right?
Mm.
I just demonstrated those things. I would be the first to get to practice. Oftentimes, I would be the last to leave. I would meet up with other players on weekends when we had those weekends available and say, hey, let's work on patterns and work on things that we needed to work on the game. I would ask the coach, could I go watch film, thinking that everybody did that and realizing later down the road that I was one of the few players that would actually take those extra steps to demonstrate that I wanted to be a master of my craft, not because I just wanted to be better, but I wanted my team to be able to trust me and be able to depend on me. And the only way they was going to be able to do that is if they saw the work that I put in. So Bishop Thomas said years ago that we are all called to the preparation. That so whatever roles in life that you're going to fulfill, you've been introduced to them before you recognize what those roles are going to be. And for me, when I had an opportunity to look back, that was my beginning stage. That was now where I could, as an adult, identify the area where I started to dive into what it looked like to actually execute my behavior in a way that someone who would be defined as a leader, a positive leader, would do it.
And so I like how you coined that and switched it into positive leadership, and to use your knowledge and your expertise and your years of service. Where do you think the state of law enforcement leadership is now? And we just keep it, in the United States of America, not abroad.
Okay. So I think that there's been a big shift. And when I say big shift, I'm talking about moving from the descriptor of enforcer to being someone now who has to think much more strategically. What I've been sharing with colleagues for some time is that the work is much more cognitive now than it is brawn, meaning that, we're not walking around looking just to lock up the bad guy, but we're also trying to make sure that the people who are in need, whether they be uh, someone with mental illness, someone who is homeless, and oftentimes, we don't carry the pedigree of social service people, but we are oftentimes confronted with the responsibility of those roles. And so now what we're looking for is people who are geared toward being more service oriented, right? Understanding that, hey, Orlando Lilly is going to encounter some people who don't really care for me too much. But does that mean that they deserve to have any less of attentiveness in the way of service? Does that mean that they deserve to have any less level of compassion? Does that mean that they have any less opportunity to express themselves in ways that may not allow me to be able to respond in a way that they are accustomed to traditionally? So we're in a space right now, I think, in the country is that we have to start thinking about law enforcement beyond the positional leadership rights. Meaning, if I say to you, do this, I expect you to immediately comply. But now I have to take the time and say, well, my responsibility is to still serve this person who I feel like is challenging my authority. And in that process, what I have to realize now is, as opposed to me just focusing on the transactional role that I have as a law enforcement, pull you over, ask you for your driver's license and registration, is now pull you over and say, "Hey, how you doing, sir? I pulled you over because you were going kind of fast. Are you okay? Is there anything that you need?" To
Mm.
make that be a relational uh, engagement as opposed to one that's transaction. See, if I pull you over and I just ask for your driver's license and registration, and I go back to my car and I run your information, and I come back and just give you the ticket, I don't know if you had a bad day and now I made your bad day worse. But if I take the time and allow myself to engage you and say, hey, although the speed limit was broken, let me find out if there's something that this person needs that I may be able to help them with. I may discover that everything is fine and that you still might need to get the ticket, but you may be able to accept that citation because of the way that I interacted with you as opposed to transactional relationship with you. And so we now, the state of law enforcement, in one word to me, from Orlando Lilly's perspective, is in a season of understanding what it means to be relational, not transactional.
And I can see that because um, in my short career at 16 years, I remember uh, those early traffic stops. It was, like you said, very transactional. Let me get your license, registration, and insurance. I come back, here's your ticket or your warning or whatever I'm going to give to you, and I walk off. It wasn't,
Uh-huh.
let me take time. Maybe this person is speeding because, someone's sick and they're trying to rush to get to them, or,
Hmm.
um, you know, their delivery person, if they don't meet their deadline, it's gonna, they might get fired or something like that. And so now we are teaching our officers to take your time, dig deeper, not just to find out any other activities, but to find out what's actually going on with the person. Um,
Hmm.
and so I do understand that, and I see that, and just my short time in law enforcement, I do see that. So, with your leadership career, your leadership journey, again, how early on in your career, I'm sure that you had some misconceptions about what leadership was.
Hmm.
How has your experience corrected what you originally thought it was?
So I hit on something earlier, and I wanted to tell you like about when we think about um, leadership, and this is what I thought it was. I automatically assumed that there was something very fluid about leadership and management. I thought those words were interchangeable. So I associated leadership with position. But leadership, what I discovered later, is not that, right? Management is position. And inevitably, positional leaders who rely on their rights develop a sense of entitlement, meaning everything is done from the chair of what I want you to do and what I tell you to do. And guess what? In that role, people will do what you're asking them to do because they have to do it. The quality of what they're doing will be predicated on, did you do that from your manager's role, which gives you rights, your position that gives you rights? Or did you start trying to move vertically up that pyramid with what Maxwell would call the levels of leadership? The first one he talks about is position, right? You know you have
Hmm.
rights. People are going to listen because they have to. But you want to move to the second one, which is permission. That is about relationship, right? People are going to do things because now they have a relationship with you. And then you ultimately want to get to the place where now you know that because they have that relationship, the productivity that they have is quality. It is results based, right? Because they know like, hey, this person got a relationship. I want them to look good. But then you ultimately want to get to uh, the fourth thing where we're talking about people development, right? People are going to do things now uh, because they realize that you're doing things for them and they want to continue that. And the ultimate, which very few organizations and people ever get to, is the pinnacle. The pinnacle now is always looking at the people who are in that posture of the people development, right? These are the people who understand the what they do because they now have the ability to stay alert about their own tendencies. And if I have a tendency that when I'm frustrated or my lack of knowledge or the capacity that I have, competence that I have is low, then I will always revert back to the thing that I do know. That's my position.
Mm.
And so I know I'm in charge, right? And if I feel challenged now because I have people questioning those things, and so I don't want people questioning because I don't really have an adequate answer. Look, we can watch this. We watch this in every place, in every platform, right? Every discipline. So it's nobody, and that's the marvelous thing about the whole concept and theory of leadership. It transcends discipline. The tenets are pretty much always the same because the components are the same. People, right?
People. People.
People. And you can't get anything done without the people. And so leadership for me now is me understanding too is that hey, you have to learn how to think globally. And thinking globally means there are going to be some things that Dominique knows that I don't know. Dominique, I don't know how to set up a podcast, right? Right. But you do.
Hmm.
And so Orlando Lilly now has this idea of let's have Natural Resources Police Department create its own podcast. Well, what I may do at the leadership role is cast vision. What Dominique knows is how to do it. He can execute it. And so the leader doesn't always have to be the person who has the expertise on doing. They have to be able to have the vision. They have to be able to have enough security to put the people around them who know what they are doing and allow them to do it. Because true leadership, what I tell people, is the difference between the person who, on a sunny day, keeps the curtain closed or open? If I keep the curtain closed, the sun will never come in.
At all.
If I
Never.
open it, the light shines brightly and it'll hit every spot in that room if it's designed right. Right? So there's no need for us to be in these roles that we have and be fully absorbed by this endless struggle to continue to think well of myself is that I'm better than everybody else because I'm not, that I'm smarter than everybody else because I'm not. I have an opportunity to serve, and the more you move up, you should be doing more of it, not less.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes, like you say, um, because and I think we're coming out of a generation of leadership where it was pretty much I'm going to take care of me, do for me, and not necessarily serve the people that you're in charge of, that you have authority over. And it was always, like you said, transactional, but it wasn't relational. And I think we're now coming out of a time where the generational uh, employee, the people who are just now coming into the workforce, are more about relationships, and they want to know the why. Things have changed. And so, with that, it leads into my next question is that you've been in this industry um, since the 90s, and
Hmm.
you came up through what I would say was one of the more difficult eras in policing, where there weren't too many African Americans in leadership positions. So how did you navigate those spaces where there weren't many examples of African Americans in leadership?
So remember what I said that you are pretty much introduced to what your role is going to be in life before you actually get there. So you are called to that. And what I didn't share with you was when I played football, there was an opportunity where something had occurred, and some of the African American players were concerned about it. And we all pretty much made a decision that we were going to walk off the field that day. And we did. But I led the charge with that. It was something was brought to me. My response instantaneous was that, oh, well, we all got to walk off the field. And we walked off the field. And so, what I'll tell you, starting back there to now, the thing that helped me navigate that space was to understand that I needed to stand on my convictions and my truth as I saw it, with the understanding that that comes with consequences, right? Because people in authority never like truly, and pay attention to the words I use because I'm being very intentional. People in authority, not positive leaders, people in authority. People in authority never likes their positional authority challenged. They see it as disrespectful. And so one of them was standing on my truth. Now, like I said, you got to understand that there are consequences that come with that. Those same people often have the influence, the levers, for the lack of a better description, to turn on or off your career trajectory, turn
Hmm.
off or on those opportunities. And you need to understand that that may occur. And you need to ask yourself, are you willing to take the risk for the greater good? Because sometimes, in my case, there were things that did not happen to me directly. There were things that I was observing happening to peers. Um, I was the president of the Blue Guardians in Baltimore County for a good length of time in Baltimore County. The Blue Guardian was formed in 1986. I was the seventh president of the organization, and we dealt with a lot of the issues that were around representation with minorities, women, specialized units, recruitment, promotional opportunities, things of that nature. And I had a really great mentor in Colonel Kim Ward, the first female colonel of Baltimore County Police Department, and who just happened to be a white female who just also happened to be gay. Probably was the best mentor that I had in my entire life. I share that with you for two reasons. You sometimes have to have people who've already navigated the space to teach you how to navigate the space. Now, let me tie it all together. I gave you the story about my football. I gave you the story about me being the Blue Guardian president. The part that I left out was both of those moments that I was dealing with navigating that space were very emotionally driven. When you operate from an emotional place, the logical and rational brain cannot hear your emotion. I often describe it as Charlie Brown talking to his mother. Want, 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 want.
Yep.
The rational and logical ear, that's what it hears. And so I got a very direct lesson from Colonel Kim Ward about emotional intelligence. That if I saw something that I thought was an issue, don't just make noise about it, but do something. For me to do something was to start getting promoted. So it didn't do me serve me well or serve any real legitimate purpose beyond me spewing my emotions to go to the chief and talk about the lack of representation in the agency. Colonel Ward indicated that whenever something needed to be done, then do it. And for me, what I couldn't depend on was the chief was going to be able to wave a magic wand and just was going to be able to promote people. The process was you study well, and you study well enough to place well. And so that became my process for my navigation of the space for representation. When it came the process for how I was going to navigate that space emotionally, I needed to tap into my emotional intelligence and realize that I needed to develop the capacity to be self aware so that I could self regulate. If I could self regulate better, then I'm much more in a posture to help other people while helping myself. At the end of the day, you and I are asking three questions when we come into this space, even as African American men. Can you help me? You know, can I trust you? And do you care? If any of those things are no's, we are going to struggle somewhat because we can identify when people have issues with us. And oftentimes, if you're not exposed to what I call implicit bias, because everything is not racism, right? Sometimes the bias is people are not even aware that they're biased. But your brain wants to fill in gaps when it does have information. And so if you don't know anything about people like me, your brain is going to grab, just like the computer does, the RAM, the random access memory. So whatever you've been exposed to, whatever you've been taught. And so someone like Orlando comes on the scene who's very opinionated, who's outspoken about issues that he sees and feels that there's some injustices and they need to be addressed. Well, for the individual who doesn't like their authority challenged or hasn't been exposed to people like me or people who doesn't have the capacity to consider that what I'm presenting to them is a real thing, then it becomes incumbent upon me more to navigate that space. This is where we then have to say what that John Maxwell calls the high road of leadership. The high road of leadership means that I still got to do the right thing for the greater good, even when it doesn't benefit me. Low road leadership is always self gratifying, self justifying. Middle of the road is saying, oh man, I want things to be fair and equitable, but it's transactional, meaning that I'm keeping score. I'm going to be fair and equitable as long as I am still getting something out of it too. But high road leadership says that you got to be that way all the time. And so navigating that space has come with time, come with education, come with mentors, and taking all of those things together and then rewiring the synapses in my brain to not throw up on the table every time I'm emotionally hijacked, because that gets us nowhere. And so navigating that space is a journey, it is not a destination. You do not reach this place of final respite where you say to yourself that I'm good. The journey is ubiquitous, right? It is widespread over the course of our whole life, and with the hopes that there's an amalgamation of people that you can unify with that can get you over the hurdles and the humps that you, and the mountains and the peaks and the valleys that you'll experience, because we still are human beings. And this is one of the few professions where we normally have the venue to be fully vulnerable without people then looking at that you're trying to cry victim or you're trying to play the black card. When you know that what you're experiencing has everything to do with who you are. And I don't care how much Brillo I go buy at the store. Only thing I'll do is put a razor on my arm. I'll be black tomorrow. And so what I have to do is I have to find that space to build relationships with people. Be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm not saying that you make me feel this way. I'm telling you this how I feel. Because oftentimes the messages can seem as though that we're trying to attack people when we're experiencing what we experience. And so navigating that space now is me saying, don't make the assumption that people should automatically understand your struggle if they've not experienced it. And so navigating that space is an exercise in futility if you do it emotionally. Navigating that space can be met with some levels of success if you can approach it from a rational, logical place. And that is even when it's at its worst and you find it difficult. And you know well as I know being in this profession that law enforcement has had some difficult seasons. It has difficult seasons. But I tell people there's bad lawyers, there's bad preachers, there's bad teachers, there's bad doctors, and but this profession, because we have the ultimate decision of what we call the ultimate seizure, that you got to manage that. And so for somebody that looked like us, you have to manage that in a way that it will still allow you to be fully present when you're at work, which can be challenging in itself.
You said so much in there. I want to go back to identifying Colonel Ward as one of your best mentors that you've had in your professional career. And oftentimes, like for me, in my first department that I worked for, I didn't have the mentorship like you did to recognize that I reacted to everything emotionally.
Hmm.
And it cost me my first law enforcement job. Like I'm not afraid to tell anybody that. Like I was so emotional about what I perceive to be you guys are withholding opportunities for me because of who I am, not because of the work I'm
Hmm.
doing. And it led to me ultimately going through a hearing board and being terminated and having to start over. I started over after 10 years with one department, having to
Mm.
find an opportunity somewhere else to where I can rebuild and rebrand myself. And to no effort of my own, I was introduced to the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, where I then began to get the mentorship I thought I needed earlier in my career, or I wish I had early in my career.
Mm,
And talking with different people from different backgrounds, different departments, that I felt for the first time nobody was threatened by me wanting to aspire to do more and be more. These individuals like yourself began to pour into me, because I don't believe that
mm,
mentors will say, "Hey, I'm here, I'm a mentor," but if you go
mhm.
to seek them, they know what the position is and where they need to help you out and fill the gaps in. And so you now, paying it forward, mentor others. Like, there's so many people you have mentored. Like, I hear it all the time. Oh yeah, Colonel Lilly, that was my guy. Like, he helped me, get promoted, or he helped me with this situation and that situation. And because I live in Baltimore County, I hear it a lot, especially on the west
Mhm.
side of the county. So,
Mhm.
um, how is it now that you identify individuals whom you will or pour into and give your time and ability to mentor them?
So now, it's, because a lot of people will just seek me out still. I mean, even on LinkedIn, there's people that I don't know. They work in other states, and I have no idea, Dominique, how they found out about me. But they will friend me on LinkedIn, and somebody will say, inbox me and say, "Hey, I heard about you. I know you don't know me," and I don't even do that. Well, how did you hear about it? I make a decision then that if that person went through that trouble to hear about me, but then sought me out, that is automatic to me that that person is an assignment to me. Now, keeping this in mind, you can care for people without leading them, right? But you can't lead them effectively beyond the position without caring for them. So you gotta. So for me, because I genuinely care about people, if I see you, if I start paying attention to something, catches my attention. With you, I can tell you your ambition caught my attention. So because I knew that you was ambitious, I also knew that that could also be an Achilles heel, right? That could so normally it'll be a drive. It'll be some characteristic of a drive. For you, it was ambition. For the other guy that I just told you about, it was, man, this dude sought me out and asked me on LinkedIn, would I be his mentor, right? Or me doing, and I've developed over years a routine, if you will, that I always do one-on-ones with the people that I work with. Not just the immediate people, not the people who are just immediately in, are in my management line, but officers, sergeants. The officers are normally a little bit harder because of the number of officers, but normally with the bosses, I'll meet with all the sergeants to do one-on-ones. I'll do all the one-on-ones with lieutenants. I'll do all the one-on-ones with captains. I'll do all the ones with the majors and my lieutenant colonel, right? And what happens out of those meetings are me taking a moment to pour into people a philosophy, because authentic leadership is a philosophy, which can turn into mentorship. And so I try to practice what I preach. One of the things I share with people, and I've shared this with you, I'm a big proponent of something that General McChrystal calls shared consciousness, where it's a systematic way of understanding things, lateral connectivity, and understanding that you have to have people who do different things, have different roles, and pair them together, oftentimes because they need each other and they need to share information. The other side of that becomes empowered execution, where people are making the best possible decisions at every level. And the biggest thing that I pointed out to you about those two things was that is to lead like a gardener as opposed to a chess master, planting seeds.
Mm.
So when I plant seeds, those are the things that buds into people saying, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" Because for that one person, I watered them. For that one person, I pruned them. For that one person, I helped them harvest something in their life. And then that conversation turns into, hey, I was doing this. Did you talk to Lily? Right?
Right.
Now, I would be lying to you, Dominique, if I said to you, man, that gets exhausting, right? Because I don't always have an agenda when I do those things. I do not have a template for when I do them. I really, and for the people who will listen to this podcast, for the people who think spiritually and theologically, it will make perfect sense. For those who don't, it may not. But what I do is, for the theological and religious people, I wait on God to tell me what I need to say to them. For the non-religious people, I wait on what God let me see in them, right? And if I see something, you ambitious, you have the tenacity and the audacity, the boldness to reach out to somebody you don't even know and
Mm-hmm.
ask what I meant to you. That's bold. You don't know you I don't know, you talk to one person that potentially whatever I did worked for them. One
Mm-hmm.
person, right? So then I'm like, well, how did that turn into that? But what I realized was that what God allows me to do in those moments is iron sharpens iron. And oftentimes I used to think that that meant the people who was just as sharp as me. Mm-mm. I had to think about it differently. If you've ever seen one of those wet blocks that people use to sharpen knives, it doesn't have a sharp edge.
Not at
It's
all.
a block,
Mm-hmm.
right? It serves no purpose other than to sharpen a knife that could be used for a multitude of things. So sometimes people that I'm helping are the block. They're helping me sharpen myself, right?
Mm.
And it has taken me time to understand that and realize that leadership, positive leadership, always focuses on the value of each person. And because I understand that each person has value, those are the things that the moment that you're in my presence, and listen, there's some people that I've done this for and I've reached out to, and it wasn't, they didn't receive it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't take that as rejection. I can be frustrated by it because for me, I'm like, okay, I know I didn't just pick this person out. Like that person was in my path. But then what I had to realize is what I just told you about the gardener's role. Sometimes the gardener role is to plant a seed. It's not to
Mm.
water it. It's not to prune it. It's not to harvest it. Sometimes it's just to plant the seed. And it may be somebody else that's supposed to water it. Somebody else that's supposed to harvest it.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
so to get to the place ultimately, and this is a real term where people has this identity fusion. Identity fusion is that you find your purpose. Now, if you looked up purpose in the dictionary, it would just say, uh, your reason for being. That means nothing, right? But if I tell you identity fusion in the way of purpose, and the way that I understand it from the author, is what I can tell you that it means that in when you find a thing that allows you to contribute to other people's success and contribute to helping and developing other people and contribute in that process that what they're doing will also help other people, you found your purpose. You
Wow.
found your purpose. Your purpose is always connected to contribution. And if it is self investment, that's not purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just not. That's low role leadership because it's always about you and what you can get out of it and what you mean. And this is why, like when I first met you, uh, you always reminded me, and you gonna probably look crazy when I tell you this. You always reminded me of a bag of popcorn. There's a whole bunch of kernels in that bag, right? But then once you put it in the oven, man, that stuff just popping, pop, 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 pop. It's everything pops. but there's always some colonels that don't, right?
Hmm.
And what I wanted you to be was one of those people to not be the popcorn and just the next thing you popping with that, you doing with that, you doing with that, and leaving kernels behind. What I wanted you to be, and I tell people this because we don't use these anymore because we always buy these instant popcorn now. But I tell people, I said the Jiffy Pop all popped every kernel. You just had to be careful about how long you left it on the stove,
Because I
right?
burn
Because it was scorching, right?
it.
So so I use that analogy to tell you that you have two sources of things that can allow you to get something quick, but something else that makes you have to take your time with it, but you got to watch it, right? The microwave is a quick process for popcorn. Throw it in there, walk away, come back. The Jiffy Pop, you got to stay right there with it. And so for those people who allow themselves to take their time to fully mature, to grab every kernel, needs to be use the right conduit to flourish. And so I think that my mentoring process has always been if you're coachable and teachable, I'm gonna grab you. If you're coachable and not teachable, man, I'm gonna give you what I can give you, and then I gotta walk off. If I can teach you, but I can't really coach you, man, I'm gonna give you all the things that you need so you can be better, including the things and outlines, the books that I read, give them to you with the hopes that you develop. But if you're neither one, what you will get from me is what you will hear me say in general forms. That won't ever be one on one because I've already identified that you don't have the capacity to be coached or taught. And that becomes difficult for people who don't have a plethora of time and frustrating for people who have people who do want it and you not value it. Brother, I'm not doing this podcast if I don't feel like you one of those people, right? I don't
Right.
take the time to do that. I worked a long day, so I'd have made the choice to say, man, I'm gonna end this day, ain't doing nothing. Nah, I tell them I get them whenever, right?
Right.
And I wouldn't have came up with an excuse. I think I'm forward enough. I just been like, nah, man, I'm pass on that, right? And so for me to do those things is because of that, right? For me to do those, me to choose people is based on the coach, them being able to be coached and them being able to be taught, always. And no matter what their backgrounds are, there's plenty of people who, they don't subscribe to the philosophy of what I believe religiously or spiritually, and that's totally fine. That don't mean that I shouldn't help them, right? That goes into that they don't need to think like me to be able to benefit from anything I have to offer. Because I inevitably would still find out that they still have something to offer me as well.
I like that's what I knew when I met you that you saw a kid with a whole bunch of ambition, and I honestly did not know at that point how to channel it and direct it into a constructive path. And through our many conversations, not even just about law enforcement, but life, I am still learning how to better channel that because I have always, and just complete honesty, I have always felt like I was overlooked, and so I felt
Mm,
that my ambition to show you that I am capable in words of your time and investment would get me over that hump. And sometimes it just doesn't. Like it's just not your place and time in your season. Like God just didn't want me there. And I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've now had since my first employer. But you've led in a lot of stressful environments and a lot of critical incidents. When you are in those moments, when you're in that moment, what anchors you through difficult decisions?
So, being transparent, um, one of the things that I was diagnosed with after my mother's death was anxiety. And my anxiety wasn't worry. My anxiety was about expectation. That I am a high functioning person who enjoys challenges. And when I have to think through a challenge, I am normally going down the road. And in some instances, I'm running with scissors if I'm being fully transparent with you now, right? So, what I have to do is slow my brain down and ask myself, am I creating a narrative? Because when you have the kind of anxiety that I have, you also can be the acronym ANT, an automatic negative thinker.
Mm,
So I could look at those challenges on the end of failure or why I need to do this, all these things to conquer it. Now, what I have to do is I have to write down what am I thinking and what is the challenge that I got to deal with. And is what am I thinking? Is that real? And if that's not real, replace the thought. Now, I can't talk to you about me mentoring people if I don't have mentors, right? So so when I'm at the crossroad of navigating a difficult decision, I do not allow myself to be consumed by my positional power as if I got to know it all because you don't have to know it all.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So I will reach out to someone and say, "Hey, this is what I have." And oftentimes, every one of my mentors does this. Not one of them. Every last one of them. Well, tell me what you're thinking, right?
mm-hmm,
And there's a the smart aleck in me want to go, well, if I was doing what I was thinking, I wouldn't have called you, right? But what but the role of the mentor is to see if you're in the ballpark and allow you to get there on your own. The mentor is not to give you the decision for the difficult one that you have in front of you. They are capable and oftentimes of giving you the pros and cons of the decision that you may make and what you should possibly expect. If they don't know, they are wise enough because I'll choose people who don't feel the need to know everything. Law enforcement is a weird space, and you know this from doing it. We are called 99% of the time because we need to answer a question. It builds this false narrative and false sense of security that I gotta know. So I don't watch plenty of people fake it till they make it and end up faking it till they break it, right? That's people and things. I spent 30 years in Baltimore County. I can tell you that when I was a captain in Dundalk, moved to community resources, I was out of patrol. I was in patrol as a commander the first time for 3 years. Went to community resources, was there probably about a year before I went back to Woodlawn as a captain there. I was on the job, Dominique, and that much had changed from the time I went from Dundalk to community resources to Woodlawn. Now, it would have been very easy for me to say, man, I done ran a precinct before. I know how I need to deal with these personnel problems that I have. I know how I need to deal with this community. When the truth was, the community that I had in Dunlop was vastly different than the community I had in Woodlawn. The officers I had in Dundalk was vastly different than the officers I had at Woodlawn. Had I not talked to my mentor about the challenge of going to a new precinct and not using the exact same format, because there was no guarantee, one, that what worked there was going to work here.
mm-hmm,
What my
mm-hmm,
mentor said was, don't go there and do anything yet. Why do you feel the need to go in there right now and do this?
mm-hmm.
And after they heard me, what they heard was, me taking something from a previous command and trying to and use that same inoculation, right? There's a reason that every year that the flu strain vaccination is changed. I can't use the same flu vaccination that was made 5 years ago for the flu today,
Nope, not at
right?
all.
So the vaccination that I had for what I thought that needed to change in Dundalk was not necessarily going to work in Woodlawn. I needed to find out what the strain of what I had there was before I tried to come up with anything. And part of that required research and observation. He let me get there by myself though. This was Chief Jones down in Arlington, Texas. He when he asked me, why do you need to do anything? He didn't say don't do anything. He asked me, why do I feel like I need to do something right now? What was
Hmm.
the exigent circumstances that required me to do something right now? There wasn't one, Dominic,
Hmm.
other than
So
the
you
sense
took
of
your time.
urgency of the decision. Other than me creating in that decision making about how I get the personnel back on track to be much more uniform about what it was doing, how I got them to understand that when you out in the public, you don't have to do it like I do it, right? But if I'm out of my car, it takes nothing but 5 seconds to say, "Hey, how you doing, sir? How you doing, ma'am?" Right?
Yep.
Those little those little things go such a long way. And I tell people they're like your credit card with grace and mercy, right? Because that's your social credit card in the roles that we have. As a law enforcement officer, your credit card is grace and mercy. If you show compassion, the grace period people have when you don't get something right is exponential. The mercy that they will have is exponential, right? But that's if you use your social credit card right. And that comes with you being able to take the time with the decisions that you make and knowing that you don't have to have an answer all the time. Knowing that you ain't got to be the person that got to do it all the time. Asking yourself, is there a level of urgency or exigency that require this decision to be made right now? And so, what I would say to your listeners is if you are not a journaler, journal. Kim Ward taught me that at the end of the day, I should have reflection time. If there was a decision that I made, I needed to ask myself, was there a better way I could have done it? Did I need to do it today? And was there some other people that I should have involved in that process? You should do it. She was like, you should do this every day. So my reflection time now is on my way home. I
Hmm.
reflect on all of the decisions that I made during the day and say, was this a decision that checked a box? Or was this a decision that served purpose for the greater good of those that I serve?
That's yeah. I need to start journaling, and I said I want to create a journal for that, like a daily reflection journal, like the decisions that I've made. How did they affect people? How did I was affected, and should I have included somebody else? Should I have consulted before I made a decision? Because I often find at the end of the day, you know, something I look back, I was like, man, I should have took my time, but you know, thinking that I had to make a decision right then and there led to me not making the best decision in that moment and having to later stand on it and say, hey, hey guys, I didn't make the best decision, and we have to course correct. Um, I got a couple more questions, and I'm gonna get you up out of here because I know
Hmm.
you want to
Okay.
enjoy your evening. Um, it how when the pressures is the highest, right, and the spotlight is
Hmm.
on, like we just talked about, um, reflection and everything. How do you make those? What is your process for decision making in that regards? Because what I often see is that, take for instance, not too long ago we had the Key Bridge collapse, and
Hmm.
that required a lot of assets and people to come in and help. You're talking about a massive critical incident.
Hmm.
How do you make those decisions in that time, like to get your people to help out in that instance?
So So, and you've heard this before. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, right?
Yep.
So, one of the things I was taught when I was younger, and I actually was taught this in the academy. So let me preface that. One of the things that one of the, and this wasn't even in the lesson plan. This was, we were getting ready to graduate, and we're at that space now where those instructors are like, a little bit more lax. They're more, a little bit more relational than they were than in the beginning, and that allowed for some fluid conversations where you catch what I know now are the lessons that are not in the lesson plan.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that was said was, when you go to calls, when you riding around, play every scenario in your head about how you would respond to it. For me, I would always pick the scenario that I knew that would allow me to allow my adrenaline to run to the roof. A shooting, right? A mass shooting, critical incident where somebody was barricaded. I would always go through that in my head. Always say, okay. And so there are two things that come into play when I would do this. Protocol, what is the process? The other P, people. Think about the people that you got to save, or the people that you're working with, or when you're in management, the people that you're responsible for. I did not take lightly that process of critical thinking before a critical incident. What I discover is the level of complacency that can come into play if you never get to critical incident. There was
Mm.
some. Now I don't believe that there's no places like this in Baltimore County. I believe that every precinct busy now. But when I was younger, there was a couple of precincts that weren't that busy. When I was a young officer, precinct 7, we would joke people about going out there and watching the cow tip, and we used to call precinct 8 the lazy 8, right? Well, that no longer applies. All the precincts in Baltimore County now are busy. And what I knew for a fact, there was a classmate of mine, and that classmate has since passed, who went to precinct 7 right out the academy. But this also was one of my classmates who struggled. And so the reality of it was that exacerbated their struggle.
Ooh.
Meaning, they went to a place where they did not have the repetition of calls to fortify the areas of their insecurity or deficiency. They got moved to a busier precinct. They weren't ready for it. And that individual ultimately had to leave the job because they just could not do the work, right?
Right.
Well, it's the same thing applies for critical incidents. If you don't stay ready for the critical incident, if you don't do tabletops, if you do not make yourself go through all of these things with the people who are going to be involved, when showtime comes, your brain does what it always does. We have synapses in our brain that develop over time, and the idea that the ideal brain is one that looks like the raisin, right, full of wrinkles, because that
Mm-hmm.
lets you know that you got something going on. But if they look like the top of me in your head, probably ain't a whole lot going on in that space, right? If the brain that smooth. And so what I tell people is, you and I, if I asked you and I said, Dominique, when you tie your shoes, do you put the right string over the left first or the left or right? You'd have to think about it.
I
You've
would.
done that so much of repetition over the course of your life that the synapses in your brain knows what to do when you get ready to put your shoes on. So you
Mm-hmm.
just do it. The critical incident, the key bridge, me going to a barricade, me going to an officer involved shooting, and the shooter hasn't been caught. That can cause chaos in that moment for the leader who, or the positive leader, who's not deficient in what they should do and the level that they should do it. When I got on the radio for a critical incident, the voice, the tone, the syncopation that you hear me talking right now, that's how I talked on the radio. And after the incident, people will go, man, you were not stressed about anything. That's not true. But what I can tell you is if you heard me be like that on the radio, that adds to the chaos to the people who are doing the work. So in a critical incident, there has to be level heads to allow the people who are executing the work to trust in the guidance and direction,
Mm-hmm.
the assuredness of about what they're doing. And so the preparedness when we're dealing with those most high pressure things are two things to answer your question. The first thing is the headspace that we have and how you approaching it from that space, your headspace. Are you calm? Or are you excitable?
Mm-hmm.
The second place is competence, and the third thing is capacity. Can you handle it? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you cannot, because when you ask these questions, you're looking for solidified responses to give advice about what to do. But we should always talk about what happens when people can't do it. It will expose the fact that you got someone who has the role but lack the competence to execute the responsibility. They are now exposed.
Mm-hmm.
Don't nobody gossip, and I said it broken English and everything like I wanted to. Don't
Mm-hmm.
nobody uh, in law enforcement, don't nobody gossip like we gossip.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
be someone in charge who mishandles the pressure of a critical incident.
Mm.
You will suffer from that eternally.
Yep.
It may not be directly in your face, right? But you will suffer. And so the next critical incident, you could be well versed, well brushed, well prepared. The people won't trust it though,
Because you fumbled.
because you fumble,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, that's not fair, right? But nothing in life really is. So
Yep.
you and we in law enforcement, not everybody, but a significant number of us, we're not the most gentlest of souls when it comes to giving people an opportunity to recover.
Mm-hmm.
But that goes back to positive leadership, right? If I'm a positive leader, that goes back to the social credit card of grace and mercy. If I'm a positive leader who has a good social credit card, I'm going to extend grace and mercy. And what I'm going to do is, opposed to looking for an opportunity to be punitive, to do something to hurt that person, I'm going to look for an opportunity to develop them. If I can't develop that person, I'm going to look for something being some training or someone who's better than me to do it. We are not great in that space, right? And I'm telling you this from me being able to go teach leadership in other states and other agencies. It is the observation. It is the when I ask the questions, these are the things that inevitably come up. And I always kind of tell people this way. In my silverware drawer, there's a straw, a silver straw made of stainless steel. The straw, Dominique, is a durable straw.
Mm-hmm.
In the pantry, there is a whole pack of accordion straws, the ones that are bend, the ones that are flexible. The only way that those flexible straws get destroyed is when people start chewing on them. Other than that, we just throw them away.
Mm-hmm.
That steel straw, I never throw it away, but it's not flexible. It's durable,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not flexible. When we are under pressure, we have to be like the accordion straw. You gotta be flexible because situations are fluid,
Mhm.
and you need to be paired for the fluidity, but flexible enough still to be used and to be adequate for the situation. The plastic straw is still adequate for the glass of water,
Yep.
just like the steel straw. The difference is the steel straw is durable, but you still got to always adjust it to get it around because it can't bend.
Mm.
We have to be like the flexible straw to be able to be used in a way in multiple positions and in multiple roles all the time. And stress and pressure will bend you.
Yep.
If I bend that steel straw, it is no good. It's not
Hmm.
useful anymore if I bend it, right? Because it wasn't made to do that. It was made to be sturdy. It
Hmm.
was made to be pliable, but it does not have the flexibility. It has durability, but no flexibility,
Mm.
right? The plastic straw is flexible, and when we're in situations of high stress and pressure, man, we got to be like the flexible accordion straw.
That makes sense. I like that analogy that um, you have to have that ability, still accomplish the mission, because, like you said, you're still going to get a glass of water, you're still going to drink it, but still have that ability to be flexible when the time comes and understanding your role. So I'm gonna ask you a two-part question and get you up out
Mm-hmm.
of here. And
Okay.
it's really top threes, right? I
Okay.
already know because I know you that you believe in the fact that you should get education because it helps with the critical thinking process. So I know
Mm-hmm.
you're a proponent of that. So I only have to ask that. But throughout our conversation, I often hear you quote a lot of things that you have read throughout your lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
If you could give the just three books. It doesn't have to be in order, not top three, but just
Mm-hmm.
three books that you would advise to someone stepping into a role of leadership and they're beginning this journey. Three books that you would recommend to them. And then for us specifically in law enforcement, three pieces of training that will help you on this leadership journey that you would recommend to someone.
Okay. So the three books first. Um, As a Man Thinketh. The book is no longer in publication, but you can still find it. Um, the High Road of Leadership, and which is also by John Maxwell. The High Road of Leadership is by John Maxwell. I forgot As a Man Think of who's the author, but if someone Google it, you'll find it. And like I said, you can find that book used. And the third book is also a John Maxwell book. Uh, Everybody communicates, but few connect. Everybody communicates, but few connect.
So John
Uh,
Maxwell is the author of the last two.
yes, and
Okay.
I'm a ardent John Maxwell fan. Um, Training. If you've never done the certified public management program at the University of Baltimore, that is, I spoke to the executive director at Maryland Police Training Commission today as we were talking about executive level development, specifically when we're talking about law enforcement. Law enforcement is one of the few entities that you can move up into executive roles without firm executive of training that can be implemented. SMIP, great. Northwestern, great, right? FBI National Academy, great. These are all things that will aid your resume tremendously. And depending on what you take, right? For me, the FBI National Academy was great because I made myself take all hard classes. I did the total opposite of what everybody said not to do, right? Because that is how I became an ardent student of emotional intelligence. The other training that I would advise people to do, and I would advise that you should definitely do this for yourself, but if you have a team, even more so, do the DISC training, right? DISC training, right? This is where you get to discover who you are, how you operate, and how you operate impact other people. What I discovered about myself at a much later stage is we can perceive that we are developing because we are moving in a vertical direction. So I go to college, I get a degree, I get my master's. I have a meeting tomorrow to speak with a dean of a school because I'm jumping back in the ring with my doctoral pursuits. And you can often think that those are things that qualify you for the role. But what I'll tell you is, if you're, remember what I said about purpose. Purpose is about your contribution. If you don't have training that allow you to contribute to the organization and the people that you work with or the people that you work for, it's not good training. It's resume, it's resume building,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So certified public management program, um, DISC, the DISC training, and the third thing is I would probably look at something that is developed around how mentor training. We do not learn how to help other people. Every time we go to training, it is driven by self, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody needs mentor training. There's actual training for mentors, so you know what it actually looks like to mentor, right? Many of us, I've gone to a couple of mentor training. I didn't even have to go to the second one because I had already been to one. But I went because I was like, no, I need to be refreshed. So I'm clear on where my role begins and where it ends, right? And how to really help people, right? So mentor training, the disc training, which is so you can really learn about yourself, what areas. I'm a DI person, which means that I'm a dominant, and my I side is still an influence, which means I still love people. My dominant side is I love you for you to get to the bottom line. Do not do a lot of talking if you need to get something done with me. Give me what the bottom line is. Don't tell me that this speaker operates like this. It is connected to this wire. No, tell me how much it's going to cost. That's what I want. Right. Uh, uh, However, because I'm that way, I also know that that can impact other people who may not be in the DI quadrant. That some people may be in the area where they need to fully explain something. And so that means I have to, me taking that distance, make me realize, no, this is your style, but you have to develop yourself to be able to listen to other people and how they do things. Uh, we did that with the whole team at the executive team at Natural Resource Police Department. And every now and then they have to go back and look at it and say, okay, I gotta remember I'm like this, and this person is like this. So when I'm talking, and we all get to see where we fell on that disc scale. Like every last one of us got to see where everybody is. So everybody on the exec team knows where people are on that.
That's some really, really good advice. I'm definitely going. I haven't bought any books of John Maxwell, but I do listen to his leadership podcast. It's one of my favorite leadership podcasts. But now that you mentioned that, I am going to go out there and buy them books to add to the collection and see, just take the lessons I can learn. Um, and I know you don't know this, or you probably do know this. Like literally, I listen to almost everything you say, but the things you do is what I follow and try to emulate. Like you went to the CPM program, I then went. So, um, I always pay attention to how you lead and how you navigate your space because I believe that the clues you leave without even saying a word have helped me more than I think you'll probably ever know. And I thank you for that. It is always good to see someone like me doing the things that I think that I can do and I would like to do one day. And so I make sure I give that back to my people and people that I'm connected to as well. And it's part of the reason I started the podcast because I wanted people to know, you may not be able to reach out to Orlando Lilly, but hopefully this podcast will give you an insight into some of his thinking and make you a better leader for it. So thank you, brother, for giving up some of your time and your busy evening. I will see you soon. And I just want to let everybody know, if you like anything that you heard today, make sure you subscribe, share, and give me thumbs up on this one. This was definitely another banger for me. He left a lot of clues out there. I honestly didn't even do my little clue marker, but there you go. He dropped a couple of clue markers out there. But thank you guys and have a blessed one. I'll see you on the next one.